Welcome to Rock City Cookies, where we talk about all things cookies. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video. Thanks for watching. Hey sweet friends, this is a new tutorial video that shows how I made all 8 designs in this cat birthday themed set. Now, this specific design was not actually for someone who was turning 16 that loves cats. This design was for a special cat named Misty, who herself was turning 16. Now, while Misty's owner did have some special cat treats just for her birthday party, these cookies were made for the humans that attended the party as well. So let's get started with the first design, which is a cat-themed birthday cake cookie. This cake cookie cutter was purchased from Hall Fox, and I will be sure to list her Etsy shop below. But I do enjoy buying cookie cutters that I know that I will use multiple times, and I have used this cake cutter on a lot of birthday sets. So I do highly recommend it. Now for this set, my color palette is 2 different shades of teal, 2 different shades of pink, as well as white, and then a few black accents. So to start this cake design, I am using the darker teal first. Now, when thinking about the design I wanted for this cat cake, I wanted it to look like it was sitting on top of a cake plate, and I thought a scalloped cake plate would look cute. So with a thicker icing, I call this my outlining icing or my piping consistency icing, I went through and I created the design first, outlining all of the scallops, and then I went back and filled in all of the scallops with a thinner icing. Now, I actually have this icing a little too thin, and you'll be able to see why in just a minute. So I definitely recommend it's not as thin as flood, but it also isn't as thick as the piping. You want it to be a little bit an in-between consistency. This is one of the hardest consistencies in my opinion to get correctly, but just keep working at it and you will find the right consistency with practice. Because I need the bottom scalloped cake plate to dry, I don't want to work right next to it. I want to go ahead and skip up to the middle tier and work on that next. Now this is going to be the cat face in our cake, and so we needed it to be white. So first outline your section white, and then you're going to come back with a flood consistency and fill up that space with your white icing. After every section, you will see me come back with my scribe tool, and I will make sure I have popped out any air bubbles. This is especially important on sections like this that you are going to be doing marker work, because if you have air bubbles, that marker can puncture right through the top of that icing. So you want to make sure that you have all of your bubbles out, or at least the majority of your bubbles out of your icing in each section. Okay, I have let that part of the cookie dry for a little while. You can tell that it's shiny now. I did put it under a fan to dry. So let's do the cat ears, which will be on the top section of this cake cookie. So with your outline icing, just kind of eyeball it and look and make 2 triangles at the top, and then come back with a pink flood consistency icing, and then finally come back with your white icing, and that way it'll be kind of a wet on wet look. Your pink and your white will blend together, but I definitely like to do the pink first and then come back with the white second so that the pink keeps its shape. It's time to move back down to the bottom tier, which will be a 3-colored cake layer. Now, when I'm trying to break up a certain part of the cookie evenly, I find that starting in the middle and working my way outward is beneficial. But however, you may find it's different for you. So I am going to start by outlining the middle color first, which is a dark pink. I'm going to do my teal on the bottom, and then I'm going to do the lighter pink. I'm going to outline that section on top next. Now on this part of the cake, it is going to be a wet on wet technique, which means I'm going to allow all of these colors to blend together. So the purpose of this outlining is for when I do this wet on wet technique, it allows me to know where each of the colors go so that I can make sure and keep them in the exact right places so that not one color gets too thick or too thin. And then also from the side of the cookie, I still want that little visible outline to match the colors. And so this is another reason why I went ahead and outlined each section individually. That way, if you're looking at the cookie from the side of the cookie matches the colors on top. All right, so I'm going to work my way from the top to the bottom, doing the light pink to dark pink to teal. As I'm working, I will take an extra moment to try to get out any air bubbles before I move on to the next color. Once again, I put the cookie back under a fan to dry, and now that the whole cookie is nice and dry, I'm going to work on the cat face, which is on top of the white white tier. This clip art is just an image that I found on Google by searching for cute cat face clip art, and so I am projecting it here. I will be using it later as well in other designs, but here I want to start with the eyebrows because I need those to dry quickly because I'm actually going to end up painting those gold, so I need those to dry. So I'm going to start with those, and then I'm going to move down to putting on some pink petal dust onto the cheeks and a little heart because I thought a heart would be cuter than just a circle. And remember, I put everything that I use down in the description box below, so don't worry if you're curious about what products I'm using on this cookie. Look below and you'll find it listed there. After I finish both of the cheeks, I'm then going to move on to using an edible marker for the cat lips. After the lips are drawn, then we will move over to the whiskers, which will be coming out of both sides of the hearts. With your edible marker, make 3 whiskers to the right and then turn your cookie over and then do 3 whiskers on the left-hand side. Make sure that you are kind of doing about the same length on both sides, and they can be a little bit whimsical. They don't have to be perfect whiskers. If you've ever seen cat whiskers, they're all over the place. So just make sure you have 3 on each side and that they're similar in length and size. Next, using the dark pink thick icing, add a little heart nose onto the cat as well. All right, now the top of our cookie is looking a little empty, so let's add a cute little heart banner here using all of the colors of the icing in our set. So I'm going to rotate through. I'm going to do dark teal, dark pink, lighter pink, and just rotate through the colors until I have the banner completed at the top of this cookie. Okay, we are almost done with this cookie. We have a couple steps left. First, we need to paint the cat eyes gold. Personally, I use TMP's Super Gold, and I'll be sure to list it in the description box below. TMP stands for Truly Mad Plastics. I enjoy using their gold. I've used it for several years, and you just mix the gold dust that they send with some high proof alcohol. So I mix the two together until I have a paste. So you don't want it too runny or else it'll run off of where you're trying to paint, but you also don't want it too thick or else it's flaky. So you definitely want it to be kind of a paste that you can then paint on to whatever areas that you're wanting to look gold. All right, we have one final step, and that's to add a 16 onto the cake. Again, I want to make sure that we are commemorating the fact that Misty the cat is turning 16. So I wanted to include the number on the cake cookie. And with that, our cat cake cookie is done. Let's move on to the next design, which will just be the cat face. This cat cookie cutter was purchased on Etsy. I'll be sure and link it down below. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to do that same wet on wet technique that we did on the cake cookie cutter that we just did, and we are going to outline the pink ears first. Now remember, the reasoning for doing this is because I like for these small sections to keep their shape. So that means that if I want these to continue to look like triangles, I need to go ahead and flood these areas first, and then I can go back and flood the rest of the cookie. The whole rest of the cookie is going to be white, so I'm going to use my thick piping consistency icing, my outline consistency icing, and I'm going to outline the rest of the cookie, and then I will come back with my white flood icing and flood this cat cookie. I am going to speed the video up while I finish up flooding this cookie. I do want to say that sometimes whenever you have smaller sections and a large section that needs to be flooded, I typically do the largest section first, and then I'll go back and I'll do the ears. So it'll all blend together in the end as long as you're flooding at a decent rate. You want to make sure your icing is still wet while you're doing the entire cookie. However, I personally prefer to do it this way. You can do the entire outline and work your way inward, just whatever feels the most comfortable for you. Remember to pop all your air bubbles. It's a secret ingredient, in my opinion, to making your cookies have a flawless finish, is trying to get as many air bubbles out as you can. And now that our cookie has dried under a fan for several hours, we are going to add some heart cheeks to our little kitty cat. Now, this petal dust will be listed in the description box below, but I do mix it with that same high proof, high grain alcohol that I used with the gold in the first cookie. I just mix it until it's a paste so that it will stick to the cookie. Now, sometimes I do go over this a couple of times, so I did actually kind of place my hearts gently first, and then I went back over the hearts with a little bit more paste. That way I wasn't fully committed to the placement with having big thick hearts on there until I was sure I liked where they were located on the cat's face. So that's just a little tip, is if you're trying to kind of figure out your placement by eyeballing it, you can indeed just kind of barely put a little bit down without the alcohol mixed in, and then you can go back and put down the actual paste and it'll stick so much better with that alcohol mixed in. And now we can add the whiskers onto our cat. So I'm going to do 3 on each side. I'm just kind of taking my pen and making tiny arches, and that's it. They don't have to be symmetrical or perfect because cat whiskers aren't symmetrical or perfect. So just make sure you have some thick lines and you just kind of lightly pull your pen to make those whiskers. Now that his whiskers are done, we are going to keep using our edible marker to make the cat's smile. I am turning on my projector just so that I can have precision with where I'm placing the mouth on every single cat face cookie. However, this design is really pretty simple and you do not have to have a projector at all to do this one. So if you don't have a projector, I would not be too worried. You can definitely freehand the cat's face. Just take your time, go slow, and try to keep each side of the cat's face as symmetrical as you can. So after I did the cat's mouth, I am moving up to the cat eyes. I will be painting these gold just like I did on the cat cake cookie before, so that is going to have to dry. Now I'm going to move on to doing the pink cat nose next with that thick icing consistency that I used before. And for the nose, I kept it simple and I just repeated that heart shape once more. Because the set was such a fun little whimsical set, I decided I didn't want to leave the ears just a plain pink. I thought that I could layer a darker pink on top of the pink ears. So I got out my pink edible marker and just made small little striped lines inside the pink ear. It's these small little details that really set your cookies apart. So I highly recommend not skipping over the small details. If you can add just tiny little things here and there that just amp up your cookies and take them to the next level, I highly recommend doing them because they really do make such a huge difference. All right, it's time to paint these cat eyes gold. The good news is that when you use really thick icing and you're not using a whole lot of it, those areas dry really fast. So you don't have to wait just a whole lot of time to be able to paint the gold onto your icing after it has dried when it is in this small amount and with thick icing. Now that our gold is done, let's move on to the final step, which is to give our cat some cute little drop flowers. Now I'm using all sorts of tips for these drop flowers. I will link them in the description box below. There really isn't a wrong way to do drop flowers. Here I'm just kind of dragging my icing into rosettes, or I'm just blobbing the icing down to make a little spin flower. You can also twist your piping tip and that way it can spin and it makes a flower that way as well. So there's really no right or wrong way to do these drop flowers. So you can just play with your tips and play with your colors. But the most important thing is that I'm putting all of my colors onto these flowers, onto the cat, so that I have that set cohesion. And always remember that your icing for flowers needs to be a really thick icing. So you might have to add some powdered sugar into your icing to thicken it up, because if you do not have thick icing, your flowers will kind of blend together. You'll lose that dimension and they'll just look like blobs on your cookie. So thicken up that icing for those floral tips. You absolutely have to have thick icing. And to give these flowers just a little bit more detail, I am adding some white dots all throughout to kind of add just a little bit more to my flowers. And with that, our cute little cat cookie is done. Let's move on to the next design. Up next is the skeleton fish. This is an Ann Clark cookie cutter. I'll be sure and link it in the description box below. And we are going to flood the entire cookie first, and then we'll add our skeleton detail on top. Because I wanted this set to be extra colorful and I wanted all of the colors to be all the way throughout each one of the designs, I actually did this fish cookie in the dark pink, the light teal, and the dark teal. So I did this cookie in 3 of the 4 colors. I would have done all 4, but I didn't need that many cookies for this set. I only needed 3 of each design. So this cookie is obviously the darker pink cookie that I did. However, in my pictures and in the video of the full set, you can see the other colors that I did as well. I did the exact same design on all of them. It's just the base color is a little bit different for each one. So after I've outlined each cookie and I have flooded the cookie with my thinner royal icing, it is now time to let these cookies dry under a fan. Typically, I allow, when it's a solid base like this, I tend to allow about 3 hours under a fan before I move the cookie. If you move it too quickly, your icing could crack. So you want to make sure that you're getting a lot of time under a fan and let it dry before you pick it back up to work on the details on top. All right, now it is time to do the skeleton part of this fish. So we are going to outline the entire skeleton with our thick white icing. I am just following the natural shape of this fish cookie cutter. So you are more than welcome to use any fish cookie cutter you have, and you can follow the shape of your cutter and do this same sort of premise, this same design. It doesn't have to be this exact cookie cutter. In fact, this design could be on a regular plaque, it could be on a circle, it could be on a rectangle. You don't even have to have a fish cutter at all in order to get the same effect. So make sure you're always looking at what supplies you have on hand and see if you can repurpose them for all of your designs so that you're not constantly having to buy new cookie cutters for every set. Now, when you are outlining the fish's bones, you are going to want to leave some space so that you can come back and fill that in with a thinner icing. So make sure you are going slowly, working your way from one side of the fish to the other. Squeeze in as many layers of bones as you can or as you want, and then your cookie will be ready to add that flood, which will make these bones look so much better. All right, let's fill in these bones with some thinner icing. Now remember, this is that medium consistency icing. You don't want it to be as thin as your flood icing, which you used to cover the base of the cookie. You also don't want it to be as thick as what you just outlined the bones with. So it's really that in-between consistency that will be key. If it's too thin, when your icing dries, you will have a surprise waiting for you, and that will be craters. Craters are awful. They are so frustrating. So you really want to practice this consistency, because I have found that if you really have an icing that's a little bit on the thicker side of medium, it's usually perfect and will help prevent those nasty craters. And if you remember on the very first cookie, the cake cookie, I said that on the scalloped plate that I made on the bottom that my icing was a little too thin. And if you go back in the video and you look at that cookie again, you'll see that I was beginning to get craters in those scallops. So you can see that my icing was denting in and cracking. So that's what I mean by craters. If you've not experienced it, you're lucky. It does happen to the best of us. So just to let you know, that's what you're trying to avoid, is those craters. Now that we've got our fish skeleton all filled in and we've popped any air bubbles, we are going to let that dry and do 2 final details on top. Using our edible marker, we will put an X for the eye, just another symbolic mark to make sure that we know that this fish is no longer alive. And then we'll take our pink icing, our thick pink icing, and just like I've been doing everywhere else, we will give him a little pink heart cheek. And that's it. Our cute little skeleton fish is done. All right, next up is a heart that will have some gold paw prints painted on in the background, and it will have the word 16 on it to celebrate Misty's 16th birthday. To start, let's outline our heart. Now, this cookie cutter is actually from our own personal cookie cutters listed in our Etsy shop. It's a wider heart, which I like to be able to use whenever I'm going to add lettering or wording on top. And I did want to mention that in this video, you can especially see that I'm using icing that has a coupler in it, but I'm not using a piping tip. The reason for this is I actually am going to use piping tips on all of my thick icing in this set. You already saw me do it actually on the cat. I had to have piping tips for the flowers. but I actually won't use those piping tips until the very end of decorating this set. And so for now, I just cut the hole that I needed into my piping bag to be able to do all of the other detail work. That way I'm not having to switch out tips all the time. And I really do prefer cutting my tips when I can instead of using piping tips. So that is why you see the coupler, even though I'm still using a tipless bag and I just cut my hole open. I wanted to clarify that in case any of you had noticed and was wondering why in the world I was doing that. In an effort to make sure that my icing doesn't spill over the edge, sometimes I do have to use my scribe tool and blend in my flood back into the outline that I made, just so that it's a smoother finish. I don't always have to do that, but when I'm really trying to make sure that I don't have any icing spill over the edge, I kind of pull the icing towards the outline in certain areas to help prevent that. Moving on to the most time-intensive part of this design, we are going to be painting on some gold paw prints to the background of this cookie. Now, there are times where I am really envious of airbrush machines, and this is one of those times. In my almost 4 years of doing cookies, I have just not taken the time to invest or the money to invest in an airbrush machine and learning how to do it and all of the supplies that come with it. I've just decided that if there is a look that is airbrushed, I'm just going to try to get that without an airbrush machine. So this is my attempt at getting an airbrush background without actually airbrushing. I don't know if it worked or not, but I do think it's a cool technique and it does add a little bit more character to this cookie. Okay, so to accomplish this, I looked up on Google paw print patterned backgrounds or wallpapers, and this is a little design that I found and I was able to project onto the cookie. I've actually used a similar design on some Mickey Mouse cookies. I was able to find a Mickey Mouse pattern and I did a very similar thing, only I used markers instead of gold. So you can use this technique in a lot of different designs if you're just wanting a patterned background without having to airbrush. I am just using the TMP Super Gold mixed with high grain alcohol, and I'm dipping that paintbrush back in over and over again. As you can see, this did take quite a bit of time. I think each cookie took me about 4 minutes, which thankfully I only had 3 cookies that I was doing this design on, but I think it was worth it in the end. I really did like the effect it gave, but you do want to keep that in mind if you have a whole lot of cookies. You may want to limit how many you do this particular design element on, just because it does take so much time. Now that our gold paw prints are done, let's add a little lettering on top. I do all of my words in an app called Phonto, Phonto, and they have a lot of pre-existing fonts on there, but also if you purchase any fonts or if you go to a free font sharing website like dafont.com, it will download those fonts into the Phonto app. That way all of your fonts are in one place, and so you're able to make your designs all in that Phonto app. And I'm talking just about your lettering, your words, your numbers that you use. You're able to save it directly onto your device, and then you can use the Camera Lucida app to actually project it onto your cookie. And the reason why I use the Camera Lucida app over just using the picture in my phone or my iPad or using the Phonto app is because the Camera Lucida app allows you to zoom in or zoom out, which sizes whatever your image is perfectly using your projector onto your cookie. So I use both apps anytime I'm going to project onto my cookie. All right, our heart cookie is done. Let's move on to the next design, which is a ball of yarn. To start, I'm just going to outline and flood a circle cookie cutter. This circle cookie cutter is actually from Amazon. I buy the sets that come with multiple sizes of circles. They also have them for rectangles and squares, but I like those because then you can really size your circles to whatever is going on in your set. If you need a smaller circle or a bigger circle, whatever it is, you have all of them at one time, which is fantastic. So I highly recommend it. It's linked in the description box below, but I'm just going to flood this particular particular circle with the light pink, and then I'm going to immediately come back and flood and then pop air bubbles as well. And sometimes after I pop all the air bubbles, I give my cookie a nice shape and tap so that it goes smooth again, because sometimes my icing's a little thick and it needs some help getting smoothed back out. All right, now it's time to make this circle look like some yarn. So I'm going to do this by separating my cookie into 3 different sections. And because I knew I was going to be doing flowers with this thick icing, I actually made my icing too thick for piping. So while flowers require extra powdered sugar to be added to your icing so that they stay really firm, line work doesn't. So I did encounter a few problems when I was going to do this yarn, and I wanted to tell you about them so that you can understand what kind of icing you need for this type of work. The thicker your icing is, the harder it is to squeeze out of the bag. And so because you're putting so much pressure onto the bag, literally my hand was hurting, then I'm not able to hold that consistent pressure very well, which means that sometimes, like you can see here, I have a gap in my line. And also I have stiff peaks coming off the edge of my cookie. I am going to clean that up with a scribe tool, so thankfully that was not a huge deal, but I did make this harder on myself because it hurt really badly to pipe because it was so much pressure on the bag at all time to keep a consistent line across, and I had to do more cleanup work than I would have liked. So I recommend only using the consistency that comes straight out of your mixer for line work. So that means from a fresh batch of icing, it's the consistency you get when you mix your icing. That's my very favorite for piping letters for any kind of detail and line work that doesn't have to be thicker. So I highly recommend that if you do this set for yourself, that you actually take a little bit of this icing, put it in a separate bag, thicken it up for your flowers instead of trying to do all the same consistency for everything on your set, because it ended up taking me longer, it was more frustrating, and I definitely felt it in my hands. So that's just my recommendation if you do this for yourself. Okay, back to the cookie at hand. I am doing 3 different sections of the exact same thing. I'm starting in the middle of the cookie. I'm curving my lines a little bit. I'm doing my lines very close together. After I have all of my lines piped, I'm then taking my scribe, cleaning up the lines that are coming off the edge. There's not any pointy edges. And then I'm just going to the next section. So that is 3 sections that are overlapping. So it kind of gives this really cool layering effect that looks like yarn. We're going to finish off our yarn cookie with a string that I'm just going back and forth down the center of my cookie so it looks random like a string would look. And I am going to cover up that little oopsie with that string as well. I am going to fix one more place where my line work broke and it wasn't a complete line, but then that's it. Our cute little circle cookie is now a ball of yarn. Next up is the birthday name of our cat on a cat face cookie. Now, the first several steps to this cookie are going to be the exact same as what we did a few designs ago when we did the cat face. So I'm going to speed up this video, stop talking for a minute, let you just listen to music as I finish decorating. And then when I get to the place that's different, the cat's name, we'll talk then. Okay, I wasn't sure which font I wanted to use, so again in that Fonto app I played with 2 different fonts, but I decided I liked the script font better. I thought it fit the space better. So I'm just projecting using that Camera Lucida app. I'm projecting the word Misty, which is our sweet kitty cat's name, onto this cookie using the light teal. And I'll eventually have a video on what projector system I use, but I do use the Pocket Pico projector, which is always linked in my description box below. One thing I love about being a cookier and being a part of this community is that there are so many fantastic and creative people in our industry. And one of those fantastically creative people is Busy Bee Sweet. She was the inspiration behind my designs in this set. She did do a cat cookie with the name across the eyes just like this, and she also did skeleton fish too. So I'm so grateful for her creativity and her designs and her sharing them with the world so that I could have such a cute and fun cat birthday set for Misty. Alright, our next design is a cute little paw print on a circle cookie. For our background of this cookie, we are going to do a wet on wet design. So the first thing I'm going to do is outline the area where I want the color to go. So first up is our light teal. So I'm going to do a line right across the center of the cookie, and then I'm going to go up from that and create a block of space there. Then above the light teal, I'm going to outline the area that I will be doing our dark teal. And then I will turn the cookie using the cookie turntable over to do the dark pink area. Again, I'm just eyeballing this, so each section doesn't have to be perfect, but I am splitting up this cookie into fourths. So I'm going to do a pink section, and then our last section will be the lightest pink. So this way I know exactly where my colors need to start and stop, which will help get clean, crisp lines going across the cookie. To flood the cookie, you can do this multiple ways depending on what you prefer. I personally prefer to start at one end of the cookie when I'm doing a wet on wet technique that is covering the entire surface of the cookie. I like to start on one end and work my way to the other. I feel like that helps to keep everything in place where it keeps my lines looking the crispest, the sharpest line. However, if you wanted to start in the middle, you technically could. I think it's just whatever rhythm works best for you. Just make sure that whenever you're adding your new color onto the cookie that you take your time and you very gently press your icing against the existing icing. So you're not wanting to push too hard because then you could get a really wavy line. So just really gently kind of lay your icing down next to the other color and they will naturally blend together. All right, now that our icing is done, let's use our scribe tool to pop out any air bubbles and to smooth out our icing. And if you need to, you can always pick up your cookie and give it a little bit of shake, and that will really help to smooth it out so that it's a nice flat surface. All right, our cookie is dry, so it is time to add our cute little paw print on top. I found this graphic by searching on Google. I'm pretty sure I put in heart paw print or something along those lines, clip art. So paw print clip art or heart paw print clip art or image or graphic. One of those things should get you this or something similar to be able to project onto your cookie. However, this design is fairly simple. I have done paw prints in the past without a projector, so I definitely think that you could do this design on your own without a projector pretty easily. So first you're going to outline your image onto your cookie, and then you will come back with a medium consistency icing and flood in the negative space. Now I made this set quite a while ago, and it was before I was reinforcing my icing so that I didn't get craters. So I do recommend that in this small spaces here, so in the top and the pads of the paws, and then on the place where the heart is, that you actually kind of fill that in with some thick icing underneath this thinner icing to kind of reinforce this space so that you don't have any dents or any cratering. But I got really lucky, and for some reason my icing consistency must have been just right. Humidity would have been just right. I must have held my tongue the right way. I'm not sure, but for some reason I was able to keep this puff on these cookies and I didn't have any craters. I got super lucky. But I do recommend helping yourself to prevent any accidents by reinforcing your icing before filling it in with your medium consistency icing. Okay, the paw print is done, and I have to say these colors make me so happy. I love how this wet on wet background looked with the pop of the paw print on top. Let's move on to our final design, which is the Happy Purrthday cookie. Now, this cookie cutter is the Nancy Plaque from Kaleido Cuts. It is linked down below. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos. This is one of my most used cookie cutters, so I highly recommend it. It's held up great, but I really use this cookie cutter over and over again. It's an awesome little plaque that goes with pretty much any theme. We're going to be doing a pretty basic design on this cookie. So we're going to outline and flood it all in one color. Then we are going to let the cookie dry. We're going to do some gold scrapes across the top, and then we will do our lettering Happy Purrthday on top. And we're going to do a tone on tone. So here I'm doing the lighter teal as our background, and then our writing will be in the darker teal. And we'll do the same thing with the peaks. And so either way, you can do a dark background with the lighter writing or light background with the darker writing. Either way, it works great. It's that tone on tone look. It's going to look fabulous no matter which way you decide to go. After letting our cookie dry, we are now going to use a fan brush, dip it into our gold mixture, and lightly scrape it across the cookie, leaving behind some gold streaks. Now, in doing this step, it's really important to make sure that you don't have too much gold on your brush, and it's also important to make sure that your mixture is not too dry. If your mixture is too dry, the gold will actually kind of flake off of your cookie. However, if it's too wet, then you won't be able to get that really streaky look. So it's kind of a toss. You have to kind of make sure that you have the right consistency before you touch your cookie. So I really recommend having a paper towel next to you while you're working. I usually have my gold on a paper towel anyway because it can be a messy process. And then using your brush across your paper towel to make sure you're getting the right look that you want. If it's the right look, put it on your cookie. If not, then you need to mess with your gold and high grain alcohol mixture to make sure that you get the right consistency before you touch your cookie, because there's no going back. Once that gold has hit your cookie, there's really nothing you can do to fix it if you've made a mistake. Let's move on to writing the Happy Purrthday on our cookie. Now, this is a font I use in a lot of my sets. It's called Nixie 1, N-I-X-I-E, and then the number 1, O-N-E. And I just like it's a pretty fun little standard font. And so I use it quite often because it kind of goes with a lot of different themes. So I created this in Fonto, and then I'm projecting it using the Camera Lucida app and my projector. And as I mentioned before, I'm doing the darker teal on the lighter teal. I also did this in other colors, and I did the darker pink with the lighter pink as well. So use whatever combination you want, but this one is the darker teal icing written on top of the lighter teal background. Okay, that's it. That's the end of our Happy Purrthday cookie, which is the final design in this set. Let's take one final look at the entire set put together with all 8 designs. Thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial today. I hope that you found it valuable and you learned something that you can repeat with your own cookies. As always, let me know if you have any questions at all. I'm happy to help if I can, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.